Hey everyone, Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5 Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
Good morning, Rush Nation. Here we are on a Friday, getting ready for week 3. First game of the week is out the way, and the Jets beat the Patriots 24-3. I talked about this game in the Bible and the Matchup show yesterday, and I'm not that surprised with what's happened. The Patriots were always going to struggle moving the football. It was an interesting game. I think Aaron Rodgers looked good. He looked very efficient. He had complete command of that offense. The offensive line did a great job in protecting him and keeping things going there. But yeah, I think on the whole, it was pretty much as expected game. There's not really too much to draw out of this. I think if I had to take a fantasy takeaway, would be maybe looking at Tyler Conklin as someone who could get some more work in the coming weeks. He looked really good and really efficient. They started to get him open in a few plays across the middle. I don't know if it was entirely game specific and game script dependent that was the case, and they used the control and the time on the clock to utilize those plays over the middle and do that. But really, it's what we know about this offense. It's Aaron Rodgers is going to throw, fairly accurately. He's not going to move too much of his legs. Did rush for a first down early in this game, but we know this offense is entirely about Breece Hall and what he can do, and he was phenomenal again yesterday. Garrett Wilson finally scores a touchdown. For Garrett Wilson owners, that's a great thing. It's been a long time coming, but he's finally found his way into the end zone, which is great. And then also on top of that, you've got Alan Lazar gets in there, which again, good news for those who started him. I thought he could be a candidate where he would potentially get in there. So 2 passing touchdowns for Aaron Rodgers, and Tyler Conklin is probably the one player I'll be keeping an eye on as we go through the next couple of weeks, just to see if that usage trends or whether it was just a matchup specific element. As for the Patriots, they bought Drake May in late. The game was done. He actually had a drive that probably with a little bit more time could have resulted in a touchdown at the end, but he just sort of ran out of time there. Need for a pick on his first pass. That would have been a bit of a shock. But yeah, they look really solid. They look solid in the sense of I wouldn't worry that this is what the offense is going to look like moving forward. I think it's just one of those things that they were up against a really good defense. I think Brissett will keep his job next week. I don't think they were completely terrible. You look at 3 points, you look at the yardage and think they did a bad job, but they just got smothered. They didn't have a lot of the ball, didn't have a lot of time possession, didn't have a lot of possessions. They really struggled. And I think that's a big element of that. So I would be looking towards that. It's kind of like a write-off game. I think the big shock for me was Ramondre Stevenson. They didn't run the ball at all with him. He only had 6 carries. He it's down in the stat sheet as a fumble. The ball's just ripped out of him as he's falling. There isn't too much to really talk about there. Just that they decided to effectively abandon the run. So they really struggled to get anything going, struggled to get first downs, struggled to move the football, struggled to have any form of usage and containment there. And that's a problem when you've got that struggle. And part of it is probably an inexperienced game plan and not really trusting their big players to do anything. And then just played right into the Jets' hands of just throwing the football, not completing many passes. And if they are completing really short passes, struggled first downs, let the Jets dominate the time of possession. So I wouldn't necessarily sort of rip this up and think, well, this is a massive shock this is the Patriots and they're going to be absolutely terrible for the rest of the season on offense. I don't think they're going to be amazing. They lack playmakers. That's a big problem. But not giving the ball to Stevenson, and then as a result, Hunter Henry not getting a lot of traction either. It's kind of, other than those 2 bits, is pretty much I saw how this game would go. So there's not much to take away. I think like Tyler Conklin is probably the thing I'd probably be looking at and thinking about how he can be utilized more and will he be utilized more going forward. Looking at some trends for that have come out the first sort of couple of weeks and looking at things that we should be keeping an eye on in fantasy football. I'm going to just name a few players and some of their trends and peripherals because I think it's really interesting. Brock Bowers, for me, is probably the tie-in one for the rest of the season, looking at his usage through 2 weeks. I get it's 2 weeks, it could change. But his utilization is absolutely nuts in how he's getting pretty much all the work exclusively out of Minshew, other than Adams is obviously getting a good workload, but it's kind of killed Jacoby Myers, and Jacoby Myers' floor is pretty much dead as a result of Brock Bowers, which is a really key thing to note. So he for me, he could be a tight end one for the rest of the season. So if you can try and acquire him, that's a player I'll definitely be trying to do. Devon Achan, he last week had 10 high value touches with Skylar Thompson at quarterback, not a big surprise. Really, really good. He's a player I definitely look at top 5 running back rest of season, or especially in this period without Tua. Could change a little bit more with Tua. Zach Charbonnet looks like he's going to get all the carries again this week. He had 96% of the snaps with Kenneth Walker out. I think that will remain the same this week. I don't think Kenneth Walker is likely to go this week unless things change. It's recorded early on Friday morning. Jimmy Gibbs, he played a lot of snaps for him. He played over 60% of the snaps. I think it was 62% snaps, which is the most he's ever had since he's played with David Montgomery. Like, we've had more games where there's not been Montgomery. So that was a huge amount of work, considering they ran a lot of plays. It was north of 80 plays, which I think was the most of any team in week 2. One thing I noticed about Jonathan Taylor was he ran just routes on just 28% of snaps, which was really unusual. I don't know why. I know why late on this happened, but I don't know why sort of in the middle of the game that this particularly happens. It's something I'm going to be looking at keeping going forward. But if that drops, then Taylor drops a little bit down to the bottom end of RB1 in my rankings. If he's not getting any of the reception work that we kind of need him to get. I mean, 2 backup RBs caught passes in this offense, so we don't need that. So that's something I'll be keeping an eye on. Malik Neighbors had 67% targets per route run in week 2, which is just absolutely nuts. Devonta Smith had 29% targets per route run. So Smith without AJ Brown is a legit wide receiver 1, so that's one I'd be definitely keeping an eye on. Calvin Ridley in week 2 had 159 air yards, which is massive. We know with Will Levis there is plenty of air yards, and if he's a singular target, he's going to benefit quite a lot. So that's one I'd be keeping an eye. Let's talk about J.K. Dobbins. J.K. Dobbins is currently leading the NFL with 77 rushing yards over expected, and a lot of it's broken off from these big runs. And that's why I just think the floor is going to come in at some point, which is why I'm ranking J.K. Dobbins. I'm still continuing to rank him lower than the consensus. I just don't think that is sustainable, especially if a guy who's missed the best part of 2.5 years. So I'm just a little bit concerned about that, and that's one I'll be keeping an eye on. Kyron Williams. Kyron Williams had 8 high-value touches in a game where they were absolutely destroyed. So Kyron Williams is a legit top 5 running back for the rest of the season with that kind of usage, which is just absolutely mad. I'm just trying to pick out 1 or 2 other pieces. Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels' passing ADOT last week was 4.1, which is just terrible. It's not great. It's something that we got to keep an eye on. That's what's going to limit him from being a top 6 play going forward. This will keep him in the bottom end of the wide receiver 1 conversation because of the fact he needs to get that A dot up. So he's going to have to do that and find a way to do that. So we'll see what happens in the coming weeks. Cliff Kingsbury's going to have to do something to do that. Devin Singletary forced 10 missed tackles last week, which is absolutely insane. So I think he had the highest of any missed tackles of anyone in week 2. So he obviously did an amazing job. Not just last week, but so far this season. So yes, whilst sort of the volume and the high-end production isn't there, he keeps doing that. He's going to ward off all challenges and have a completely unique bell cow role. So that's one to keep an eye on. Zach Moss had 80% of the snaps, so Chase Brown is pretty much not a thing. He becomes a handcuff, so you don't need to start him in any formats. If you get him for something, that's what I'd be getting rid of. One thing I'll say about Dalton Kincaid, I have him outside my tight end ones this week because of the game script, but he has last week he had 4 specifically schemed targets, and then he also had a pretty respectable, it was over 25% target per route run. He also did miss part of the game. He did miss part of the game with a concussion. So, part of the target volume isn't there. I think it will build up in weeks. I don't think he's going to be where people drafted him, but I think he's going to be a mid-art tight end one. But I would say just don't hit the panic button on Kincaid yet. There's some that have really sort of hit the panic button. He missed part of the game. He had 4 very specific targets schemed to him, and he still held over 25% targets per route run last week. It's not all a disaster. Just, the Bills only threw the ball 19 times. That is what it is. So we just have to keep an eye. And then I have one more for you. Oh, yeah. So the other things I'll just point out here. If I look through sort of the high value touches here, Devon Achane is just well out in a league of his own so far. He is averaging 9 high value touches a game, which is just absolutely insane. He's been absolutely phenomenal so far this season. Also well out there with high value touches. The top 5 in the league are Devon Achane, Jahmyr Gibbs, Breece Hall, Kyron Williams, and Alvin Kamara. So these are the guys who are getting elite high value touch units. So that is basically carries and receptions inside the 10 yard line. So this is what we mean for these running backs. These high value touches are really, really important. Other ones that are getting really good usage right now, Ramondre Stevenson, though that didn't happen last night. Saquon Barkley, Bijan Robinson, Isaiah Pacheco did too. He's injured. David Montgomery is somewhat in there in a mix with Aaron Jones and Rachaad White. And this is what I mean when we're trying to identify players. Everyone's talking about Bucky Irving is going to usurp Rachaad White. Well, Bucky Irving's averaging 1 high value touch a game. Rachaad White's averaging nearly 5. Jerome Ford is averaging nearly 5 a game. And then we look at the likes of, just lost him, Deonta Foreman, he's averaging 2. So it's clear majorities where they're valuing players. Brian Robinson is getting slight touch more than Austin Eckler. But then you also look at, and these are some of the concerns for some of these leading running backs. Josh Jacobs, only 3.5 a game. Jonathan Taylor, only 3.5 a game. That's a bit of a concern in particular for those 2 players. But then we look at, say, J.K. Dobbins is only getting 3. So that's where I think, again, this floor could really start to come into play. One thing I'd say is interesting is, and why I'm capping Derrick Henry so far, is Derrick Henry's only averaging 3 high-value touches a game. Justice Hill is a bit closer to 5. So there are, some real issues here when you're looking at some of these sort of split backfields. Things that we're going to need to keep an eye on in particular, because Gus Edwards is still eating into J.K. Dobbins in some areas there. So there's some things that we will have to keep an eye on moving forward. And then lastly, just looking at teams that are getting these high value touches. The worst offenses right now, not a shock to anyone, will be the Bears, the Panthers, and then also the Chargers, and also the Colts, which is a big surprise. That one is a big surprise. Only 4 high value touches a game. Steelers, Packers, Giants, Jags, Bills kind of are sort of bottom 9, bottom 10 teams when it comes to high value touches. But then you're looking at some of the better offenses in the NFL. The Buccaneers, the Buccaneers are at 6 a game. The Bengals are at 5 a game. I think these will improve. We're looking at the Cowboys. They're at 7 a game. I think that will improve. The Lions lead the way, by the way. They're at 13. The Dolphins are at 11. The Washington Commanders are at 9, which is amazing, really. The Jets are just a little over 8. But I think some of these will start to. So, like the Broncos are almost at 8 high-value touches a game. I think that will drop off a little bit. The Saints are at almost 8 high value touches again. I think that will drop off due to efficiency, and the Titans are almost 8 high value touches again. I think that will drop off. So I think those backfields are, I think, artificially high, and I'll be looking to probably not say de-invest in their running backs, because Kamara I think is going to be a early winner, but I think Tony Pollard is someone I think is high for this week, but I don't necessarily rate him as highly going forward, because I think that they're operating at an over efficient rate right now, and I think that will drop. And the same way with Denver. I think Denver's high value touches will start to fall through the floor at some point in the near future. And that's going to do it. Just some trends and insights to keep you going. Get ready for week 2. Good luck this week. Let's get some wins, and I look forward to hearing about all the success stories over next week. But until then, Rush Nation, don't forget, as always, keep rushing.